As everybody knows, estimating's pretty important in this industry, so we're going to talk about estimating principles at a higher level. We're not going to get into the weeds too far, but let's just touch on some of the basics of estimating and some of your best practices.
Yeah. So first off, since I'm a finance major, which I know a finance major in construction, how dare me, but here I am.
Yeah.
So love numbers. Estimating's something I just enjoy. So we'll definitely get into the weeds. Probably have some estimating software pulled up where we can talk through some of those principles and really enjoy that. But I think it is good to have like this foundational understanding of what you're trying to do. We're speaking to every audience, right? Like foreman, superintendent, project engineer, estimators. And so I think it's good to just kind of start at the beginning. Like, what are we trying to do? I mean, obviously it's pretty rudimentary to say we're trying to estimate the costs. But there's a lot more to that. I mean, just to start, I am shocked by the number of people that don't know their costs. So in order to estimate well, you need to understand, what does my labor cost me? So what does that mean? That means, how much do I pay my guys on average, depending on position? How much does the FICA, the FUTA, the SUTA cost? Those are payroll taxes. So how much is the company going to pay in taxes? What does workman's compensation cost? Is that built into the labor rate? Do we have a 401k? Do we have a profit share? Do they have vacation policy? Do we help pay for their insurance? All of that needs to be rolled in to create a true cost of labor. And it's shocking to me, even pretty large companies, how many people don't know those principles, don't understand. I put this change order together, our average guys are making $25 an hour, so that's what we're charging.
Yep.
You're losing money because it costs you a lot more than $25 an hour. Now, those are pretty easy to calculate. You can Google most of those. But if you're new in construction, you're just like, I don't know how to figure that out. It could be estimated that your labor costs are 33 to 38% higher than the wage you're paying somebody, right? There's cases where it's a lot more. There's cases where it might be a little less. But if you're trying to say, am I charging enough? You should be probably charging around 38% more. So if you have somebody who's making $20 an hour, you should be timesing that by 1.38, which would give you a number something like $27 and change or something like that. And then equipment's the same way. Like, oh, well, I don't own equipment, so I'm just going to rent it. So I'm just going to use the cost to rent, and that's how I'm going to estimate. Do you think the rental invoice is going to cover the cost of operating it?
No.
No. And I think sometimes we're like, oh, that's obvious. But is there more to it than you have thought? Like, okay, I'm going to have an excavator on this job site. I need to make sure it's fueled. I need to make sure it's greased. I need to make sure that if there's any kind of wear items, so I'm digging in a rock, I'm probably going to use more teeth. Yeah. What are those teeth going to cost me? If you're running a wheel loader and there's a lot of blasted rock, is the floor going to be clean enough wherever I'm at that I'm not blowing tires? Am I going to be charged for tire wear? Right, a 30-second of a tire on earth moving equipment, not small equipment, on earth moving equipment, probably between like $150 to $300 per 30-second is what tire wear costs you, right? And you can go through 3 to 4 30 seconds of tire wear just in normal use on a job site. So you really need to be thinking about, what are my costs, and really diving into. Now, where you look out on equipment is, generally speaking, there's people in the industry you can already reach out to. Like, we buy a lot from CAT. Previously, we bought a lot from John Deere. In both cases, we were able to reach out to them and say, hey, we're just trying to make sure our equipment costs are right. What data do you have on gallons per hour burned? What data do you have on maintenance costs per hour? Fuel and lube costs per hour? A lot of those guys have that information, and they can share it with you. If not, we can dive into in this more detail some of the equipment costs, and we'll do that here later on today, just to give you ideas of how to estimate that. So then you know your labor costs, you know your equipment costs. Material costs are usually quite easy. You request a quote, they get you the quote, make sure it's to the job site, make sure you're including taxes if you need taxes, but that's pretty easy. Then there's this process of estimating production. And there's a lot of people who will say, I don't really need to do that because I know what my unit costs are. And I don't know, you may have heard this traveling the country, but I know my unit costs. So I can move dirt for $3 a yard.
Yeah.
I don't really have to do an estimate. Well, there's way more variabilities than that. Like, I imagine you've seen dozer pushes and you've seen several mile long hauls, right?
Yep.
The cost per yard is substantially different, sometimes double, maybe even triple. So start estimating those productions, right? And take some time. We had a whole spreadsheet on larger projects where we would analyze, hey, what's it gonna take to load? What's it gonna take to dump? What's gonna be our time traveling each direction? Analyze slope in each direction, and start to figure out, like, hey, I'm going to be traveling. There's no way to avoid traveling uphill on this job, loaded. So I'm going to be traveling uphill loaded. Like, I'm going to be slower, and all that adds up. Moving dirt is a game of seconds. Saving a few seconds every round adds up to minutes, adds up to cycle times, adds up to money made. So you have production, cost inputs, and one of the mistakes I see here all the time, we were actually talking about this a little bit last night. I have been in so many reviews where an estimator goes, I'm like, all right, we finished reviewing the estimate, maybe we didn't go into super amount of detail in each item. We get to the end and I'm like, all right, here's our indirect costs, the costs that aren't actually in the item. Maybe you have safety money because you're gonna have to buy some PPE and you're gonna have to buy some cones, so you carry a little bit of money for safety. Maybe you have a safety manager in your company and they're gonna get charged to your job for a certain amount of time. Maybe you have other items like business development. Hey, we wanna make sure we can buy the client a few lunches, say thank you for the work. So you have all these indirect items. Finish that, and then it's about, hey, what's our overhead? And then what's the profit we want to make on the job? And you get to it and you're like, all right, profit seems kind of tight here. Maybe we should bump it up. Well, we could, but I'm not sure if we can win it because our unit costs are what they are, and I'm pretty conservative on everything. Like, okay, wait, hold on. We're pretty conservative on everything? Why are we conservative on everything? Like, don't bid conservative on everything. Get your team in and push to the level of comfortability, like being comfortable. Like, don't be conservative. Like, hey, we can doze this many yards per hour because we analyzed it. I'm comfortable as an estimator. The superintendent's comfortable, or the PM's comfortable. The executive's comfortable. Let's agree to that. Don't put conservative production in and then have your profit margin small, because guess what happens when that budget goes out? We manage to a budget. It happens all the time. We estimate and say, hey, this is conservative, and then we manage to that conservative production, and guess what we do? We hit it. Mm-hmm. So where's your profitability?
Yeah.
It's gone. Because it was conservative, but the team out there doing the work doesn't remember that or know that. They just say, here's our scoreboard, and guess what? We're winning. We did what we were supposed to do. We hit budget. So you have to calculate your true inputs of cost by being analytical about them, but don't put fluff in your items. Like, it's probably one of the biggest mistakes I see. And this, translates over to job costing and can be a whole nother discussion about why it's important not to do that. The only thing I would add is your overhead is connected to a budget. And so we did this a little bit different than other companies, and this is what we said. This year, we will do this much in revenue. And because we'll do this much in revenue, here's all of our costs. You know, the people who aren't getting charged to a job, so admin staff, executives, accounting, whatever, they're not getting charged to a job. Potentially insurance costs and home office costs. Anything that you know is going to be hard to job cost, charged to a job. So we took all those costs and then we divided them by how much revenue we wanted to do. So, hey, our costs are going to be $2 million for our overhead, and we're going to do, close to whatever, $22 million this year. And the number pretty consistently that we came up with was somewhere between 9.15% overhead to 9.3% overhead, percentage of cost. The reason we did that was we wanted at the office level to be living by the same principles that the job level was. And we said, all right, for this year, we now have our job budget. Mm-hmm. For 2020, our job budget is these numbers. And so every month as we build, we would compare how much we billed to how much our office was costing. We didn't want the field to go back and say, well, you guys don't get it. You don't know what it's like to manage budgets. Or you guys spend money on things that aren't important. No, we said what was important, we decided it, we created an overhead, and then we stuck to that budget all through the year. We worked on it. Not everybody does that. And a lot of times what they'll do is say, hey, we think our budget's going to be about, we think our overhead's going to be about 6%. And if they spend 7, it's like, well, we spent 7, right? The reason that's important is you should be adding profit on your overhead. So your profit should be on all of your costs, both fixed and variable. Fixed would be more your office expenses. Variable would be more those costs that vary depending on how many yards of dirt you move, how much SWIP you install. Really, both of those make up cost, and profit should be on top of that. If you don't get your overhead right in estimating, if you don't come up with a budget and have that right, it skews your profit. So say your overhead's 6% and you are charging 10% profit on top of that, but your overhead's really 8%, before you even got going, you're not going to be as profitable as you thought. The company's not going to be as profitable just because you got it wrong. So getting your overhead, which is this input cost, the bigger you are, the smaller that number is. I've seen that number with really large general contractors down around 5, maybe even 4.5%. But most people are operating between 5 and 11 to 12, depending on how specialized you get. If you have engineers on staff, sometimes that comes up a little bit higher.
So going to production rates.
Yep.
I know historic production rates are important. They serve a purpose. How do you make sure all that data that you've gathered from the field is useful going forward?
Yeah. I'm going to answer that, but I want you to remind me to talk about historical data because you bring up a point that I want to make sure we hit on. Mm-hmm. So I think what's important is look to that. So some softwares make that really easy. Some estimating softwares, like the one we currently use, ties into our operational system. So I can say, hey, I'm moving dirt. I have a phase code that's in our estimating software that's place cut to fill. I can say, hey, I want to see any job that has done this, and I want to see anyone that's done it within plus or minus 5,000 yards of this job, and it will pull that historical data, and I can look at it and see, how does that compare to what we're doing. So some of it's getting systems in place that help make that easier. But even then, I think what one of the downfalls is really relying on what did we do it for before. And the reason that's a downfall is every job is different.
Yeah.
Like those are really just guidelines that help you look at it. But we had a job, we were able to do nearly the entire job with a dozer. All of our cuts were like 300 feet. We can move a lot of dirt really quick, really cheap with dozers. Mm-hmm. And so if we would have went into that job and said, hey, we're going to use scrapers on this, we're going to pick it up, we're going to put it back down, our cost would have been probably double. We wouldn't have got the job. And it ended up being a good job for us. So you can't always rely on that past data. So one, have a system in place that allows you to do that. If you don't have accounting software and job costing software, and you don't have estimating software, that gets more difficult, right? Like that's where there are some growing pains. You know, getting from 5 million to 20, you have to really make those investments. If you don't, sooner or later, you're going to have a really, really bad job, and you're going to lose hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars, because it's just too hard to do like this. So having all those helps with that, but ultimately, really getting your operational team involved, I think, is an important part, because you know, when we sit down, and a lot of times the operational team would be like, "Hey, that's really quick." Okay, I can respect that. That's really quick. But let's just run through the numbers. So if you run through the calculations, almost always you align. And when you do, they're gonna be more likely to hit those numbers. If you just send a budget out, and I know this isn't necessarily part of estimating, but it's that transition from estimating to the job. If an estimator just says, "Here's your budget, go do it," I can guarantee you that superintendent and that project manager and that foreman are gonna go out there, and they're very likely going to say, "We can't do this. This is stupid. Office doesn't get what we do."
I hear that a lot.
I hear it all the time, right? But if you bring them in and say, "Okay, well, if you don't think we can do it, help me understand why," and maybe they have a point. Maybe you can't be that fast. But maybe when they say, "Hey, this can't be done that fast," you say, "But okay, if it can't be done this fast, can we go a little bit smaller equipment?" They're like, they might agree, "Hey, I don't need a 349 to install this sewer, because it's only 8 feet deep. I can do this with a 330, no problem." All right, we slow it down, we change the equipment a little bit, and all of a sudden the unit cost is the same, but you're both aligned. If you don't do that, they're gonna show up with a 349. And I shouldn't say this is always the case, because there's definitely really good managers that would never let this happen. But there's also a lot who just don't know any better, and they'd say, "Well, the budget says it's a 349, we got a 349 in the yard, we're gonna go do it. And it's going to take us 30% longer than what they said. It's just, it is what it is."
Do you make sure the field talks with the estimating staff for every project, every estimate that goes out? How do you determine how to pull them into projects that are being bid?
So that's tough to do, and we don't. But we do have somebody with operational experience that's in the office.
Gotcha.
And they are involved in every review. And then during the transition, the handoff, we allow for budgets to be changed. So, "Hey, we bid it this way. Let's run through it. You don't think it should be that way? Okay, how do you want to do it? All right, let's run through those numbers. Okay, we can do it that way, but it has to be this much faster. Can you lay an extra stick a day?" I'm using pipe because it's an easy one. Or can you set 2 catch basins a day? Or can you move an extra 150 yards a day? Or the opposite, "Hey, we can add that extra equipment, or we can downsize that equipment to be slower." And when we do that, it just goes better. Like, there's a lot more alignment. The people who are going to be on the job feel like, "I had a say in the estimate. I'm set up to win," and it's pretty impressive. We've gone into meetings like that, and you've met one of our superintendents. He's really vocal. And he came into that meeting, and he was just like vocal. "It can't be done, can't be done." And we said, "Okay, how do you want to do it?" "All right, tell us." And we walked through it all. And this comes back to something we talked about earlier, which is the way he wanted to do it when it was all said and done. We're like 3 cents a yard different. Like, "Yeah, this is how you want to do it. We got that equipment available. Doesn't hurt me any. Yeah, do it. Own it. It's yours."
Yeah.
And then he's got a lot more buy-in, and it's not anymore, "I'm not making your budget." It's like, "I'm going to make my budget," right? It almost fosters that extreme ownership by letting them have that buy-in. So I know we're talking about estimating principles, but I think this is an important part of estimating. Don't let there be estimating versus field, office versus field. Like, make sure there's collaboration, because that alignment will allow for there to be much greater success. I hear this all the time in really big companies. "Hey, our man-hour factor is this. Hey, whatever. And what I mean by man-hour factor is we can install this many units of whatever task with this many man-hours. We need this much management because we have this many man-hours on the job. And those are all good indicators, but what it doesn't allow for is innovation, right? If we're getting better at something, and we should be, we're implementing software and systems and all these things, right? You know, we've taken so many processes that were paper to digital. We've taken, just an example, an equipment inspection form. They used to have to go through and check boxes, fill it out, give it to their foreman, all this, right? Now on their phone, it's quick. Pictures, snap, 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 done. That should equal some efficiency. If we never take into consideration the improvement, then we always let our costs stay the same, which is fine because you say, well, then we'll be more profitable. But to me, what I see most common is we manage to budget. And so what we do is we get more efficient, but we leave our budget here, and all of a sudden we just meet it. We know the decision isn't, it doesn't happen this way. It doesn't say like, hey, how can I beat this item by as much as possible? A lot of times what happens is, hey, this issue came up. We got $20,000 left in our budget to handle it. So let's get it taken care of for $20,000 or less. And so just don't get so reliant on historical data that you don't allow for the innovation and efficiency in your company to be manifest in your budgets. Like, we should be trying to drive down our costs. We should be trying to be more efficient on a regular basis because we'll win more work at the same profit margin, or we can win the same amount of work with more profit. Ultimately, both make you more profitable.
And you're competing with others too that are potentially improving.
Correct.
And so if you're not reflecting that, you're going to become less and less competitive.
Yeah, and I mean, that's why the smaller companies can be more disruptive usually.
Yeah.
Right? To be in a position where you can rely on historical data, you usually have to be sizable and been around for a while. So if those companies continue to rely on historical data, and I'm sure at some point somebody will come on here and debate this with me, and that'll be awesome because I'd love to understand their perspective more, and I think we'll both be the wiser for it. But ultimately, I think if you rely on historical data, you're going to find that you're off more and more. Like, it's no different than in Arizona, it's hot. We would continue to get hotter. So if you just say like, and drier, if you just say like, hey, this is the average, there's more and more days that exceed the average, right? So the data just takes longer to catch up than than how quick the change is happening. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like, you have this trailing data that takes a long time to catch up to the changes you're making.
What if I have pressure to mess with my numbers because I'm not winning a whole lot? And I need work for my guys, then what? What do you do from an estimating standpoint?
That's a really good question. This is a tough one.
Yeah.
Like, because you want balance, right? You want your guys to be busy. But let's just put this, like, let's play a little scenario, okay? It's February, and I have a 2-month gap in my schedule. I know I've won something, and this project comes up, and the project's a 4-month project. So it's going to fill in that 2 months and 2 months more. And I really need it. So I go out and I win the project. But I win it at basically cost because I want to keep my guys busy, which is good. Like, awesome on you for caring about your guys. So during that 2 months and the next 2 months, so that total of 4 months, you have to do that work and start your next project. That also means during that 4 months, you're likely not able to bid any other projects that are profitable. So not only did you affect your ability to be profitable on that job, but during the next 4 months, you likely have missed out on opportunities to be profitable moving forward. So the reason it's a balance is you can't just not work. But taking jobs for the sake of taking jobs affects that job, and it makes it so that there's lost opportunity in the future. And so I'd say, if hopefully you have enough work where maybe you can go accelerate a project. Talk through it like, hey guys, how could we go finish up this project we have going in 4 weeks? In the meantime, we know there's another project starting, and we're going to go bid projects the way we should bid them. And if it takes us a little bit longer to win it, it's okay, because we're going to go get this one done. We're going to start the next one, and we're going to stay disciplined. Staying disciplined is really, really important, because it's very difficult to win a project, or it's very difficult to make money on a project when you've already bid it at a loss. Like, it's hard to do. I talked about we've done it, and it can happen, but it's not easy. Like, construction's full of the unknowns. I mean, anybody who's out there doing it every day would be like, all we did today was fix crap that was broken and wasn't supposed to be there, like, so it's just a bunch of curveballs, I feel like.
What do you do when you just have a total bust? How do you learn from that? How do you guys approach it? I mean, just a total, absolute lemon of a bid. You win it, you're stuck with it, then what?
You gotta rally everybody, in that you can't learn a lot if you don't get everybody to come together and talk about the estimate. You win a job, say it's a hard bid job, and so you're lucky enough to know, I bid it for $2 million, the next guy was $3 million. Like, oh crap, I left $1 million on the table. They awarded it to us. Get everybody in there, figure it out. Did you blow the budget? Like, the first thing you do is panic, right? But believe it or not, you may not have left a lot of money on the table. So get everyone involved. Scrub every item. Figure out, did we leave money on the table or not? I mean, obviously you left it on the table because there's a gap of that, but can I still make money? And then if it's like, clearly I can't, okay, how do we mitigate the loss? Let's not worry about like making money, but if we're gonna lose 6, can we lose 3? And I know that sounds simple, like, yeah, everyone should do that, but you'd be surprised. Like, sometimes people just go into it and like, this job's a mess, and it is what it is, and we're just gonna get it done and behind us. But if you come up with a really good plan and you mitigate that loss, that means that's so much less to overcome. The other thing is, when you get done, figure out how you did. Hey, were our bid items that we said were a bust, is that where we lost the money? Sometimes it's not. Sometimes you think, hey, I thought we were gonna lose our tail on this, but we were able to be innovative and we exported dirt cheaper than we thought. But where we really got hurt was installing curb and gutter, whatever that is. So I guess maybe in a short answer, get the whole team involved. Analyze the bid when you find out that you won it, that you think there's a bust. And maybe that happens right after bid because it's a public bid, or maybe it's a few weeks into it, people start realizing, hey, there's not enough money in these items. Have the meeting, figure it out. But don't forget at the end to do that debrief and to talk about what went well, what didn't go well, how we did financially on each item, and then take away what can be learned from that data.
I guess to wrap up here, is there value in watching what others are doing and paying attention to how others are estimating? Or is it important to just stay focused on your numbers, your data, how your estimates are performing, how your crews are performing, and ignore everybody else?
Yeah, I mean,
it's probably easy to get caught up in what others are doing.
I'd say it's probably a little bit of both, right? Don't ever think you have it all figured out.
Yeah.
One of the things you hear a lot is like, man, they left a lot of money on the table. They're gonna lose their tail. Like, they left 7 or 8 or 10% on it. They got that job for $30 million and the next guy was $33 million. Just keep a watch on it. They may have had a better plan, right? Like, I've seen it plenty of times. Like, you get out there and you're like, oh, they're pouring all that bridge deck on grade and then they're gonna dig the dirt out afterwards. They were more efficient. They had a better plan. That happens sometimes. Or I have no idea how they're going to do that. And you go by there and you realize, oh, they're hauling all their dirt in. Where's it coming from? It's coming from another one of their projects. So they bid it with a strategic advantage. Because if you just always chalk it up to they blew it, you might not be getting better.
Yeah.
If you say, man, they left a lot on the table, but what did they know that we didn't? I think you're more likely to be creative and innovative to keep up with others. Because trust me, there is a lot of companies out there who have been 10% low on a project that are still in business and made money on those projects. But everyone else said, man, they blew it.
That's interesting.
Yeah. Now, there are times though when you don't want the noise around you to bother you. Like if you feel strongly that you have a quality process that's important, or a process needs to change for safety reasons. We did this with drilling. We believed strongly that segmental casing was the right way to drill in our market because it kept holes from collapsing. All the noise around us would say, that's the wrong decision. Mm-hmm. But for us, we analyze the costs. We know we can be very competitive. Maybe not as competitive in all scenarios, but most very competitive. And we keep our people safe. So for us, we're going to ignore the noise and keep moving forward. So there's a little bit of a balance there.
Gotcha. All right, well, I think that's basic estimating principles.